Well, NAPLAN testing has been axed for all Australian school students for 2020 due to the coronavirus crisis. The exams, which were scheduled for May, were cancelled on the basis that results may have not been indicative of student performances if participation numbers became insufficient. To discuss this and more, I'm now joined by Chief Learning Officer at Cluey Learning, Dr. Selina Samuels. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Firstly, the right decision you'd expect given the current circumstances?
Look, I think it was the right decision to make. We know that everything is up in the air, there's a lot of disruption, and the last thing that children need and the last thing that teachers need is anything more on their plate right at the moment.
Absolutely. And this, of course, comes as research has found that close to 1 in 3 Australian parents admit that they don't know why their child is doing NAPLAN or unsure. Is that a worry, do you think, that particularly given that we've seen NAPLAN results have been quite bad in Australia?
Well, look, our research, Cluey did some research which said that 1 in 3 students across the country finds NAPLAN makes them nervous, and it may be the most anxiety-provoking thing they've done at school. But at the same time, over 70% of the parents we spoke to didn't really know what NAPLAN stood for or didn't really feel particularly concerned about NAPLAN. I don't think it's necessarily surprising that parents don't know what NAPLAN is for. I think there's been a lot of hype around NAPLAN without necessarily addressing the fact that it's a benchmarking assessment for fundamental literacy and numeracy skills, which we as a country think are really important for children as foundations for further education and work. So I think that some of the discussion around NAPLAN has sort of somehow forgotten the fact that those skills are still really important.
We have seen results across the country lately have declined in recent years. Why do you think that there has been such a decline?
I think that's a very hard question to answer. Educators all over the country are busy trying to determine this, so it would be perhaps difficult to pick any one thing. I would say that they are not necessarily all on the decline. We know that children find the numeracy section of the NAPLAN assessments particularly nerve-wracking. 43% of the children we surveyed said that. And I think there is perhaps a bit of concern around the way that the NAPLAN questions are formulated. That's different from the way that the syllabus necessarily formulates those questions. So it may be that children weren't properly prepared for NAPLAN. I think we also are seeing a drop in some of the literacy results, and we saw that too in the PISA tests, the OECD PISA tests for 15-year-olds that are international tests. So I think my sense is that children are not doing enough. They need to be doing more of that fundamental literacy and numeracy skill building right across the board.
Just on another matter, we know that schools remain open for now amid the coronavirus pandemic. Some parents are already keeping their children home out of their own volunteering. How can parents, I guess, structure the online school day at home?
Very good question. And yes, a lot of parents are already homeschooling, and we've been working with homeschool parents for some time, even before all of this. Structure is very important. And this advice, I think, is coming from a lot of different places, good advice. Start the school day, start the homeschool day, at the same time as children would otherwise be starting school. Keep that morning routine consistent and familiar. Make sure that you work in a place that's designed for work. It may be the kitchen table, but keep meals away, keep learning focused in the one space. And for a lot of parents, they're going to be working from home at the same time. So they feel free to work alongside your children. You will be demonstrating, you'll be really role modelling how work is increasingly going to look as we progress into the 21st century. So keep learning space clearly delineated from the rest of the domestic space, and don't eat while you work. That's very important.
How can you also keep children engaged while they're at home and they might get distracted by other things around the house?
Well, they will get distracted, and sometimes the things that they get distracted by are not necessarily bad things. So, for example, I've been recommending that use the kitchen and the ingredients in the kitchen as opportunities to learn, to do some basic chemistry, to follow recipes, that's useful and educational. Repurpose things around the house for educational reasons. Don't feel that you have to keep learning as a sort of serious, silent activity. So sometimes when you think that children are being distracted, you can actually use that distraction as opportunities to learn. There's also a lot of resources online. There are galleries, museums that have put their collections online. There are films, YouTube and all those things. So it's about taking the opportunity to experience and to really consume that material, but then the important thing is to translate that into something active. So what I would say to parents is passive learning isn't as good as active learning. So if you can get children to do something with what they're looking at online, that will mean that it will lay down those neural pathways to help them remember and learn the material. It's important to be engaged with what they're learning too. So it's not just about them being engaged. I think parents have to be engaged. And that means perhaps getting them to teach you what they're learning. The material that their schools are sending home, actually get them to teach it to you. That will help them to embed and consolidate what they've done, and it will give you a chance to understand how much they're understanding and how much support they may need.
Some terrific advice there, certainly a different area for parents to try and navigate at this time. Chief Learning Officer at Cluey Learning, Dr. Selina Samuels, thank you so much for joining me.